Hey there, Logan aka Unitic here for my second video in a series of short videos to talk about Lyme disease, tick-borne illnesses, and hiking the Appalachian Trail. Strange combination of subjects, but if you watch my first video, you know why I'm interested in both. And today is March the 2nd, 2013, and in some parts of the country it's going to be warm enough soon that deer tick nymphs, the second stage of the life cycle of a deer tick, will start hatching out en masse. That's what bit me in May of 2011 and started my experience and odyssey and falling down the rabbit hole kind of experience with Lyme disease. So today I want to talk about the symptoms of Lyme disease to help people better equip themselves to identify it early, but also talk about steps you can take to prevent Lyme disease, the kind of information I wish I had been more well versed in before I went backpacking in Mammoth Cave National Park almost 2 years ago. But honestly, before I really started backpacking seriously 20 years ago, this would have been information important to have. And I'd like to start off by sharing an article, a blog post actually. It was written by Dorothy Leland of LymeDisease.org, one of the most well-established and well-read Lyme disease information resources and advocacy groups in existence, based in California. Dorothy wrote a blog post on her blog called Touched by Lyme at LymeDisease.org about my friend Reverend Mike Gatton. I met Mike because his church hosts our Lyme support group here in Louisville, Kentucky. And the reason they chose to do that is because Mike was infected with Lyme disease several years ago and has had a really hard battle with it. Mike's one of the most special people I've ever had the privilege of coming to know, and his congregation has rallied around him and us to make the Lyme disease topic part of their ministry. So let me read you real quickly just a short entry from Dorothy's blog about Mike, because it tells you a little bit about some of the symptoms you want to pay closest attention to. This is dated June 13th, 2012. Michael Gatton is the minister of Hurstburn Christian Church here in Louisville, Kentucky. He's also a farmer. One day in June of 2010, after mowing his fields, he noticed what he thought was a speck of dirt on his bare skin. When he tried to flick it off, it turned out to be an attached tick. He removed it, and later a small bullseye rash developed at the site. A doctor gave him a short course of antibiotics and said he was good to go. But he wasn't good to go. Soon he developed all kinds of physical problems and consulted several more doctors, including an infectious disease specialist. The ID doctor told him Lyme doesn't exist in Kentucky and refused to explore it as a diagnosis. Gatton was worked up for a variety of maladies such as West Nile virus, ALS, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue syndrome. Nothing was resolved. Then in April of 2011, Mike got nailed by a second tick. This one packed a more powerful punch. He soon became deathly ill with a temperature of 104, difficulty breathing. He saved the tick this time and took it to a different ID doctor. The second doctor declared that there was no reason to test the tick because Lyme disease doesn't exist in Kentucky. This doctor also refused to consider Lyme as a diagnosis. Eventually, Gatton found an out-of-state doctor who diagnosed him with Lyme and prescribed an antibiotic protocol. Still in treatment, Gatton reports he is much improved. I just spent about an hour hanging out with Mike about a week ago in his office, and I'm thrilled to say, as we all are, that he is doing better. He's had a really rough spot making it through this because he went undiagnosed and untreated for so long, and the infection was allowed to spread and set up in his body. Mike presented the number one most classic symptom, a bullseye rash. It's a myth that everyone that gets Lyme gets a bullseye rash. I didn't. I got a rash, but it wasn't a bullseye. But at the time, I had this belief, which is commonly distributed in the media and in mainstream medicine, that you always have to have a bullseye rash to get Lyme. If you do have a bullseye rash, you should insist upon treatment, and don't ever let a doctor tell you that Lyme doesn't exist in your part of the country. I heard the same story, and I've heard it multiple times since from many, many patients. As long as there are the vectors for the deer tick, Lyme disease can spread. And the number one vectors, they aren't the only ones, but the number one are the white-footed mouse, which carries the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria, and when the deer ticks, young ones, bite the white-footed mouse, they pick up this bacteria, maintain it in their gut, and pass it along to their next host. And the other vector is the deer. And deer actually are immune to Lyme disease, but they carry the ticks to further and further geographic areas. And when the adult ticks take a blood meal, this is the stage that comes after the nymph, the very, very tiny poppy seed sized tick. When the adult ticks later take a blood meal so they can reproduce, the females, they typically do it from a deer or a human being. Then they drop off, lay eggs, and the cycle starts all over again. And then those young, those nymphs, carry the Borrelia burgdorferi, and the process grows and grows. That's why Lyme disease is spreading, because if it's not interrupted, if it's not sought out, detected, treated, intervened, it's going to spread. It spreads through ticks biting migratory birds and moving throughout the country, as well as deer and people. So, bullseye rash, you should get treatment. But most people never even realize they've been bitten by a deer tick. They're so tiny. And as many as half of those that do realize they're bitten don't see a rash. Many times they bite you in places you won't see the rash, like your groin or your hair, or somewhere behind you, the back of your neck. So other symptoms. Typically, and this is different for every patient because everybody's immune system is different, and some people's immune systems are more resistant to the Lyme bacteria. But you very well may feel flu-like symptoms, and I'm going to read from this brochure, which is actually put out by another great advocacy organization called Lyme Disease Association. And you can visit their website and order these, as well as other pamphlets and tick ID charts. I'll be carrying these on my Thru hike, as well as the tick ID cards from the same organization, Lyme Disease Association. And I'll be leaving those in every AT shelter that I cross, and passing them out to hikers that I find, trying to get this information out there. But let me read to you a few of the symptoms. We mentioned bullseye rash, flu-like illness, muscle pains. These are some of the ones I've underlined, are the ones I experience. Joint and muscle pain in feet, swelling in the toes, ankle pain, stiffness of the joints in my neck and back, neck creaks and cracks. My neck cracked so loudly that people could hear it across the room. Neck stiffness, TMJ, shortness of breath, heart palpitations. This is one I didn't experience, but it's really common, and that's facial paralysis, also called Bell's palsy. It's a classic symptom of a Lyme infection. Dizziness, poor balance, lightheadedness, wooziness, confusion, difficulty in thinking, concentration, forgetfulness, poor short-term memory. These were all things that really affected me, and they still do. Difficulty with speech, blurry vision, increased sensitivity to light and sound. Most of these cognitive symptoms I still experience to this day. They're not as intense, but I still struggle with them. And you'll see me sometimes reaching for a word, stumbling. Sometimes I say the exact opposite of what I intend to say, use a word incorrectly. And that's really common. Mood swings, disturbed sleep, something that still bothers me to this day. Panic and anxiety attacks, weight change, fever, sweats, chills, and many more. Again, Lyme is considered a mimic disease, meaning it can show up and present itself to a well-trained physician as a number of other different kinds of syndromes. It's easy to misdiagnose, especially if you're not even considering it as a possibility. And that's what we're finding in so many states around the country that aren't considered endemic for Lyme. 37 years ago, there wasn't a single state considered endemic for Lyme until this epidemic started to show itself in Lyme, Connecticut. Hence the name. Now 10 states, according to conservative CDC estimates, are considered endemic in 37 years. The last CDC statistics that came out indicate from their estimates that in just the 3 years between 2009 and 2011, 1 million more people have been infected with Lyme. Most of which, as much as 90% of which, don't know they have it. They've either gone undiagnosed or been misdiagnosed multiple times. It's a lot of sick people, most of them going without treatment. So let's talk about prevention. You know, some of the things that I'll be doing on this hike, and I'm going to read from this pamphlet again because I don't want to skip one of these really important prevention techniques. So things like treating your clothes with permethrin-based repellents. Permethrin is actually an insecticide and can kill the ticks if they stay on the clothing long enough. So I'll be wearing clothing made of a fabric called Insect Shield that has the permethrin actually impregnated into the fibers. I've got socks, pants, shirts, a bandana, all with that permethrin-based insecticide. You can also get it in a spray bottle, and you can treat your own clothes. It's inexpensive, it's effective. I'll even be treating the ends of my hammock because I'll be staying in a hammock on my through hike, and if those ticks happen to get on the ends of that hammock, that permethrin will honestly propel them to jump off, or if they stay on it long enough, they'll get ill and potentially die if they're on it long enough. You don't want permethrin on your skin. That's really, really important. You know, if you put it on you, it's going to get in you. And that's true for anything. We'll talk about in a later video diet and exercise and other really, really important activities and practices for keeping your immune system strong, which is the #1 defense against contracting Lyme and fighting Lyme, is a strong immune system. I don't put anything on my skin that I wouldn't put in my mouth because it's ultimately going to wind up in your system. Tuck your pants, wear light colored pants, because those little brown flecks, as you heard in Mike's story, look like a speck of dirt, and they can be so tiny you won't notice them on dark colored clothing. So I'll be wearing light colored pants, and every hour or two, especially if I've gone through any kind of a grassy or overgrown area where the ticks will crawl up on the ends of blades of grass or brushy areas, and they'll wait for a passing mammal. They will sense your carbon monoxide and your body heat, and they'll be prepared to grab onto your clothing. If they're on that light colored clothing, it takes them a long time to crawl up to a place of bare skin where they can bite. Stop every hour or two and do a good check. At the end of the day, do a really, really good check. So I'll keep my pants tucked into my socks. I won't have any bare skin that they can easily get to that won't take them several hours to climb up to. Frequent tick checks. At night, check really closely. You know, it's great to have a close friend or a partner who can check places you can't see and make sure they haven't gotten up into your hairline or on your back or even in your waist around in an area you won't necessarily be able to see. Those are really, really basic and important steps to make sure that you prevent a tick attachment before they have a chance to bite. If you do find one attached, it's really important to remove it properly. You never want to use a match or anything hot to try and get the tick to release. That's a wives' tale. These bacteria are in the gut of the tick. You don't want to do anything to that tick to force it to regurgitate the contents of its gut into you. You want to grab that tick as close to your skin as possible with very fine point tweezers if you have them, and pull gently and steadily backwards. They have a proboscis, a nose, a snout if you will, that looks kind of like a like a sawfish. It has hooks that hold on to your skin when you try to pull backwards on it. So it's really important to do this gently. I usually try to get a piece of my own skin, and that way I make sure, even if I lose a little piece of skin, that I've gotten all the tick out of me. There are also tools you can buy that help you remove a tick with a twisting motion, and which takes into consideration those kind of reverse angled hooks in the tick's mouth that hold onto your skin. So I think it's really important to hang on to the tick. Even though Mike had a bad experience with taking the tick to his doctor, as he should, taping it to maybe a piece of paper or 3x5 card, writing down the date and the location geographically of where you found that tick and what part of your body, and taking it to the doctor. Those ticks can be tested to find out if they do have the Borrelia bacteria in them. Many of these symptoms can come on slowly over time. And as we briefly talked about in the last video, the current lab tests are so insensitive, ineffective. They can be used to confirm a diagnosis, a clinical diagnosis, but they can't be used as a primary diagnostic tool. Even the CDC says this, because there's too many false negatives. So you may not test positive at all, ever, because your immune system's suppressed, or timing-wise, you may take the blood test too soon before your antibodies have had a chance to be produced by your immune system, or too late after the Lyme infection has had a chance to continue to suppress your immune system. So clinical diagnosis is critically important. And if there's any chance that you've had a deer tick on you long enough that you could have had that bacteria transmitted into you, I know what I'll be insisting upon with any medical professional that I come across again, and that's preventative doxycycline. Antibiotics, a very simple generic antibiotic. Most people have little to no side effects with it. It does make you sun sensitive, so you want to try and stay out of the sun while you're on it. But it will eradicate the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria if it's caught early enough while the spirochetes are still in your bloodstream. So I know I've covered a lot of information here. I kind of feel passionate, as you can tell, about making sure and getting as much out there as I can as early as I can. It's March. Deer tick nymphs will be out early with mild winters, but spring, April, May, June, peak time for deer tick nymphs. And they're so hard to see. That's the way most people get infected with Lyme is through the nymphal stage of the tick, even though the adults later on in the summer can infect you too. So get out and enjoy the outdoors, but take these steps to prevent getting bitten. If you get bitten, remove the tick properly and go see a doctor. If you get the sense your doctor doesn't know much about Lyme, you can either try and educate them or go someplace where you can find someone who knows more. Lyme literate medical doctors, LLMDs, you can find them on the web. And for more information, go to LymeDisease.org, Lyme Disease Association, and there's a great patient forum called LymeNet. You can just Google LymeNet, and those folks can help you find a Lyme literate medical doctor in your area. So that's all for today. I'll try and post up another video here in a week or two, and thanks for paying attention today and hanging in with me for a bit of a long video. I'll try to keep them short in the future. Thanks.